Elizabeth, though I usually called her Liza, was my wife. I'm Mark. We first crossed paths back in college, hit it off pretty quickly, and didn't waste much time before tying the knot soon after graduation. From there, life moved along the typical route. Raising 2 kids, buying a house, and keeping up with a hefty mortgage. Liza dedicated herself to being a stay-at-home mom while the kids were young. But once they grew up, she decided to pick up her old career in real estate again. Liza's always been an attractive woman, the kind that turns heads without trying. I figured she probably dealt with her fair share of teasing at work, but to my knowledge, she never gave me any reason to doubt her loyalty. She does have a mischievous side, though, likes to crack a risque joke here and there, which, now that I think about it, may have caused tension between us once or twice. Together, we raised 2 children, our son Jake and our daughter Leah. By the time this whole ordeal began, Jake was already 21, done with vocational school, and working as an electrician. He had moved out, but stayed close by. Leah, on the other hand, was 19 and off at a state university, a good 150 miles away. With both kids out of the house, Liza and I were starting to look forward to our next chapter. Retirement, travel plans, and maybe some grandkids to spoil. Our love life wasn't anything wild, but it was steady. It started out passionate, like most marriages do, but as time went on, things settled into a comfortable routine of a couple of times a week. That suited me just fine, though I noticed Liza's enthusiasm wasn't quite what it used to be. Still, after years together, I'd gotten pretty good at knowing how to please her, even if there were always little bumps along the way. One of those bumps came in the form of our neighbor, Tom. About 5 years ago, he and his wife Sarah moved in next door, and we ended up becoming friends. The problem with Tom was his obsession with practical jokes. He couldn't resist pulling stunts on everyone around him, and more often than not, I wound up being his favorite target. What made it worse was that Liza seemed to love his antics, especially when they were aimed at me. I tried explaining to her how much it bothered me, even tried playing along a few times, but she just laughed it off and kept encouraging Tom's nonsense. After a while, I started noticing something else that made me uneasy. Tom seemed a little too interested in Liza. He'd make offhand comments and jokes, and Liza would always respond with laughter, sometimes joining in on his cruder jokes. Meanwhile, Sarah and I would sit there, forced to grin politely while they entertained themselves. I could tell Sarah wasn't thrilled with their behavior either. One time, we were all at the beach, and Tom decided it would be hilarious to mock some boaters as they passed by. To my dismay, Liza joined in, laughing right along with him. Sarah and I were left stunned, but no matter how much we tried to get them to stop, they just kept laughing like kids who'd gotten away with something. Things reached a boiling point during a visit to Tom and Sarah's house. Sarah and I were relaxing in the backyard while Liza went inside with Tom to grab some drinks. We were chatting when it dawned on us that they'd been gone for a suspiciously long time. Feeling uneasy, we went inside to check on them, but the kitchen was empty. Just as we started searching, they emerged from the living room, arms casually draped around each other, giggling like teenagers. Tom had lipstick smeared on his collar and around his mouth, while Liza's lipstick was smudged, and her hair looked like someone had been running their hands through it. Sarah and I froze in place, completely stunned. "Hey guys. Sorry for the wait. Got a bit distracted showing Liza my artwork," Tom said nonchalantly, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Liza, wearing that same mischievous grin, chimed in, "Tom's got some incredible prints, right, Sarah?" she said with a wink. I finally gathered myself enough to speak. "What's going on here? Why does Tom have lipstick all over him, and why do you look like you've been kissing?" I asked Liza, my voice sharp. "Oh, relax, Mark," she said, trying to sound casual. "I was just checking out Tom's engravings up close, and I guess I got a little carried away. Don't tell me you're mad over a silly prank." At that moment, something clicked. Tom had that familiar smirk he always wore when he was in the middle of a prank, and Liza couldn't quite meet my eyes, as if she was holding back laughter. My frustration was about to boil over when Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Tom, if you think you can behave like that with another woman in our home, you've got another thing coming." Tom and Liza, as if on cue, burst into uncontrollable laughter. Sarah, realizing it was another one of their pranks, let out a sheepish smile, but I was too angry to find any humor in it. One of these days, you two are going to take it too far, and it's not going to end well, I said through clenched teeth. Oh, lighten up, honey. You should have seen your face. It was hilarious, Liza said, still chuckling. Tom offered to fix us all drinks to smooth things over, but I wasn't in the mood. Later that night, after we got home, Liza seemed to realize I was still upset. I'm really sorry, honey, she said softly. It wasn't anything serious. I just put some lipstick on him and messed up his hair a bit. We never meant to upset you. We were about to call it off when you and Sarah walked in. Are you still mad? I'm trying not to be, Liza, I replied, though the anger hadn't quite left me. But you've got to stop getting involved in Tom's pranks. Seeing you like that, it made my heart stop. You know how much loyalty means to me. I understand, Mark, she said, her tone earnest. I care about loyalty just as much as you do. I'd never do anything to hurt you. Mark, please. Just don't hold this against me forever, okay? Liza pleaded softly, stepping closer. Give me a passionate kiss and tell me you forgive me. I sighed, letting go of the frustration that had built up. Fine, Liza. Just don't let it happen again. 2 weeks later, we were back at Tom and Sarah's for another one of our Saturday night dinners. The evening started off as it always did, with good food and light conversation. Then, as we were finishing up, Tom's phone rang. He answered, thinking it was for Sarah, who worked as an ER nurse. It's the hospital, he said after hanging up. There's been a serious accident. They need you right away. Sarah let out an annoyed sigh. Damn. Let me grab my things. I'll head out now. Within 10 minutes, Sarah was gone, leaving me, Tom, and Liza alone. That's when Tom turned to me, wearing the same mischievous grin he always had when he was up to something. Hey, Mark, mind giving me a hand with a quick project in the basement? Won't take more than a few minutes. Sure, I agreed, getting up to follow him. I noticed Liza stayed quiet, avoiding eye contact, but I didn't give it much thought. What do you need help with? I asked as we descended the stairs. Nothing complicated. I just need you to hold something up while I attach it to the ceiling. Sarah is too short to help, and I can't manage it alone. Sounds easy enough. He led me to a metal support post near the furnace and grabbed a small metal box with a power cord dangling from it. As I got into position, I noticed Liza had followed us downstairs and was standing off to the side, watching quietly with a peculiar smile. I didn't think much of it and focused on helping Tom. Hold this steady while I grab my tools, Tom said, positioning the box against the ceiling. I wrapped my hands around the post, pressing the box up as instructed. Before I could react, I heard 2 sharp metallic clicks. I looked down, confused, and realized Tom had handcuffed me to the post. What the hell, Tom? Get these damn cuffs off me, I demanded, yanking at the restraints. Tom chuckled, clearly pleased with himself. Sorry, buddy. Liza's been eager for a closer look at my artwork, and we figured this time. We didn't need you or Sarah around to ruin the fun. Liza giggled, giving Tom a playful nudge as she exaggerated the sway of her hips. They both turned toward the stairs, leaving me stunned and furious. You're going to regret this, Tom, I shouted, struggling against the cuffs. Get back here and let me loose. Liza glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Relax, Mark. I'm just going to admire some engravings, she teased, laughing as she disappeared up the stairs with Tom. Panic and anger hit me like a freight train. No matter how hard I pulled, the cuffs wouldn't budge. The support post was solid, anchored firmly into the concrete floor and bolted to a steel beam above. I wasn't going anywhere. Upstairs, I could hear them moving around, their footsteps muffled through the ceiling. Moments later, they entered the master bedroom. Liza's familiar giggles echoed down, followed by the thud of shoes hitting the floor. My heart pounded as the unmistakable sounds of intimacy began to filter through the floorboards. Evan, I want you, I heard Liza whisper, her voice breathy and eager. Fury surged through me as I imagined what might be happening. The bed began to creak rhythmically, each sound twisting the knife deeper into my heart. I pulled harder at the cuffs, ignoring the pain as the steel dug into my wrists, scraping them raw and bloody. My mind raced, caught between disbelief and rage. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we'd built? Minutes dragged on, and eventually, the noises above stopped. Silence settled over the house. Exhausted and defeated, I slumped to the cold cement floor, gripping the post tightly as despair took hold. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps descending the stairs. I didn't bother lifting my head. I felt drained, emotionally and physically. Oh my God, his wrists are bleeding. Liza gasped, hurrying toward me. Mark, it was just a joke. Nothing happened. I swear. We didn't do anything. Tom, who had lost his earlier bravado, nervously fumbled with the key. Give Liza the key and get out of here, I growled, my voice low and dangerous. Once I'm free, you're going to regret ever pulling this stunt. Tom hesitated, glancing nervously between Liza and me, before finally handing her the key and backing away toward the stairs. Moments later, I heard his truck roar to life and peel away down the street. Liza knelt beside me, tears streaming down her face as she unlocked the cuffs. My wrists throbbed in pain, blood trickling from the raw skin where the metal had cut into me. Mark, please, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just a prank. We didn't do anything, I swear. I stood slowly, towering over her as she remained crouched on the floor, her eyes wide with fear. You'd better find somewhere else to sleep tonight, I said coldly. And don't come back without calling first. If you do, I might do something I'll regret. Mark, please. I love you. You have to believe me. Nothing happened. You're my husband. I don't care what you call it, Liza. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same as cheating, and that's all that matters. Expect a call from my lawyer. We're done. Without waiting for her response, I turned and climbed the stairs, leaving her sobbing on the basement floor. No, Mark, please. Nothing happened, she cried after me. What do I tell the kids? I didn't respond. I walked out, heading straight for my car. Just as I got in, Sarah pulled into their driveway, her tires screeching as she came to a stop. Where's that lousy husband of mine? She demanded, stepping out. There was no accident, and I didn't need to go into work. Sarah's eyes widened in shock as they landed on my wrists. Mark, what happened? Dear God, look at your wrists. Let me help you bandage those. I gave her a tired, exasperated sigh. Tom and Liza pulled another stunt. They crossed the line this time. Sarah, I'm done. I'm divorcing Liza. Oh my God, what did they do? She gasped, visibly distressed. You'll hear it straight from them soon enough. I'm heading home to take care of my wrists. Once I'm done, you can tell my soon-to-be ex-wife that she'll find her stuff packed and on the porch. If she wants back in, she'll need a court order. Mark, what exactly happened? Sarah wailed, rushing toward her house. I didn't bother to answer. I got in my car, my anger simmering beneath the surface, and drove home in silence. Once there, I washed my wrists with antibacterial soap, wincing as the raw skin stung under the water. After applying ointment and bandaging them carefully, I turned my attention to Liza's belongings. Methodically, I gathered her things, packing them into large plastic bags and placing them neatly outside on the porch. The phone rang several times, but I ignored it, focusing solely on what needed to be done. When I finished, I locked the door, undressed, and lay down in bed. Despite my exhaustion, sleep refused to come. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the events of the night before. The phone rang again in the morning, but I didn't answer. After a quick shower and breakfast, I changed the bandages on my wrists, relieved to see there were no signs of infection. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell chimed. I glanced out the window and saw Sarah standing on the doorstep. I opened the door and gestured for her to come in. Morning, Sarah. They really went too far this time, didn't they? She said quietly, stepping inside. Unfortunately, yes, I replied, leading her to the living room. What's your plan now? She asked after we sat down. I'm filing for divorce, I said calmly. First thing Monday, I'm scheduling a meeting with a lawyer. Sarah sighed deeply. Mark, I know you're upset, furious even, but can't you wait until you've cooled off before making such a drastic decision? You and Liza have been together for almost 24 years. Don't you want to try and salvage things? I won't tolerate being betrayed, Sarah. I warned her many times before, and in my eyes, she betrayed me last night. It's over. But they insist nothing actually happened, Sarah countered. They're saying it was just another one of their pranks. Nothing physical happened between them. Their words aren't proof, I retorted. It felt real enough, and that's what matters. They can't prove nothing happened, so I have to go with what I believe. To me, it's the same as if it did happen. Liza showed no respect for me. Can't you at least hold off and try counseling first? Liza's devastated, Mark. She regrets it deeply, Sarah pleaded. She had her chance, Sarah. I warned her about this kind of thing, and she didn't listen. It's too late. I've made my decision. The lawyer will handle the rest. Sarah sighed again, a mix of frustration and sadness on her face. I haven't decided what to do about Tom yet, but I hate that this could ruin our friendship. Make it clear to Tom that our friendship is over, I said firmly. And while I'd like to stay friends with you, Sarah, I don't think we should see each other while you're still with him. Is there anything I can tell Liza that might give her hope? Anything at all? If she can somehow prove she didn't sleep with Tom, I'll consider it. But I don't trust either of them. To me, it feels like it happened, and that's enough. Sarah nodded reluctantly. Okay, Mark. I'll tell her. I'll miss you, you know. I'll miss you too, Sarah. Let me load Liza's things into your car so you can take them to her. I assume she's still moving in with her sister? Yes. Her sister Linda lives across town. She's a widow and has plenty of space, so Liza might stay there indefinitely. I carried the bags of Liza's belongings to Sarah's car, loading them into the trunk. We exchanged a brief, somber farewell, and I watched as she drove away. Once back inside, a troubling thought crossed my mind. What if Liza came back while I was at work on Monday and changed the locks? I couldn't risk that. I immediately looked up a locksmith and arranged for him to come by that afternoon to change the locks. After unplugging the house phone and switching off my cell, I busied myself with household chores while waiting for the locksmith. Once the new locks were installed, I drove to the supermarket and stocked up on frozen dinners, enough to last me the week. Returning home, I couldn't shake the hollow feeling of being alone in a house that, for nearly 24 years, had always included Liza. But the lingering anger at her betrayal kept me from missing her too much. Around 7:30 that evening, while I was watching TV, the doorbell rang. Peeking out the window, I saw Liza's sister Linda standing on the porch. "Hello, Linda," I said, opening the door. "Come on in." "Thanks, Mark. Can I have a moment of your time?" she asked as she stepped inside. "Of course. Want something to drink?" "A Coca-Cola would be great," she replied. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a can of Coke, and handed it to her. After taking a sip, she began, "I suppose you know why I'm here." "Yes, I do. If you're here to plead on Liza's behalf, you're wasting your time," I said bluntly. "No, Mark. I'm not here to plead. Liza told me everything. She's falling apart because you won't speak to her. That's why I'm here, to deliver a message, or rather, a few messages." "All right," I said, crossing my arms. "I'll hear what you have to say, but I'm not making any promises. First, Liza wants you to know that she loves you deeply and regrets her actions." "Anything else?" I prompted. "She's willing to take a lie detector test to prove she didn't do anything with Tom, or with anyone else, for that matter." This caught me off guard. It wasn't something I had considered before. I considered Linda's words as she watched me, quietly sipping her cola. The idea of the lie detector test wasn't something I had thought of before, but I quickly came up with a few conditions. "All right, Linda, here's the deal. First, just proving she didn't sleep with Tom doesn't guarantee we'll reconcile. Second, Tom has to take the same test, and both results must match. Third, I want approval over the questions being asked during the test. And finally, I'm not paying for it. They'll have to cover the costs." "That seems fair, Mark. But if the tests prove their honesty, wouldn't you be more willing to consider getting back together?" she asked, hopeful. "No," I said firmly. "She hurt me deeply. Even if I decide to give her another chance, it'll take a long time before I can forgive her, let alone trust her again." Linda nodded in understanding. "Got it. I'll pass your terms on to Liza. Mark, I'm truly sorry for what happened. When she came by earlier today, I intended to lay into her for being so reckless, but she looked so devastated, I didn't have the heart to say much. She knows she made a terrible mistake and is aware of how much pain she's caused you. I'll give her some sleeping pills tonight. She hasn't stopped crying since she spoke to the kids. She contacted the kids? I asked, surprised. Yes. She told them everything. They were upset with her, and since then, she's been a wreck. I sighed, feeling a mix of emotions. Thanks for delivering the message, Linda. And thanks for the concern. No problem, Mark. I hope things work out, one way or another. With that, she stood, finished her cola, and left. After Linda's departure, I reflected on the situation. With some of my initial rage subsiding, I could think more clearly. Did I really want to end a marriage that had lasted nearly 24 years? Could I ever forgive her, even if she proved nothing happened? I didn't have an answer. Needing a break from my thoughts, I headed to my office and poured myself half a glass of scotch. After adding an ice cube in the kitchen, I wandered around the house, the memories of our life together flooding my mind. My contemplation was cut short by the doorbell ringing. Peering through the window, I saw our daughter Leah standing at the front door, looking visibly upset. My first thought was that she might have discovered the locks had been changed and her key no longer worked. I opened the door, and she immediately strode inside, casting me a hostile glance. "What's up with the locks, Dad? And why are you ignoring calls?" I had to drive 150 miles to get answers. "Sorry, Leah," I said, closing the door behind her. "I didn't mean to avoid you or your brother. I assumed Aunt Linda already told you what happened." "She did, but I still don't understand why you kicked Mom out over a stupid joke. Can't you forgive her and let her come home? She made a mistake, sure, but it wasn't worth blowing up your entire marriage." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Leah, it wasn't just a joke. I've warned your mother repeatedly about those pranks she and Tom pull, but she ignored me. This was the final straw. I barely got anything out of Mom when she called me, other than that she thought it would be funny. What was so bad about it?" I sat her down and explained everything, starting with the earlier lipstick prank, the escalating behavior, and finally, what happened in the basement. I rolled up my sleeves to show her the raw, scabbed-over wounds on my wrists. Her expression shifted from anger to shock. "Daddy, this is awful. Is that when you told her to leave?" "Yes. It looked and sounded like they were having sex. And I know your mother's bedroom noises, Leah. Either they really did it, or they're phenomenal actors. In my mind, they crossed a line. That's my reality unless she can prove otherwise." Leah looked down, processing what I had said. "So, what happens now?" "I told your mother she could take a lie detector test, and Tom too. If they pass, I'll have to reconsider things. But even if they're telling the truth, it hurt me deeply that she thought I'd find this kind of prank funny. I don't know if I can ever fully reconcile with her." "I'm really sorry about all this, Dad," Leah said softly. "I hope you and Mom can work things out because I love you both. Despite what happened, I don't want to lose either of you." I hugged her tightly, feeling the familiar comfort of holding my little girl, though the resemblance to Liza made the moment bittersweet. "I'm trying, baby. I miss your mom too, but I'm still struggling with how little respect she showed for me." "I get it now, Daddy. I didn't realize how serious it was. I'm going to visit Mom and try to calm her down. I'll probably stay at Aunt Linda's tonight, and then I have to head back to school tomorrow." "Okay, baby. I'll turn my phone back on after you leave so you can reach me." "Jake tried calling too, right?" "Yeah. He's working upstate and couldn't reach you either. He wants to talk to you." "All right. I'll make sure my phone's on so he can call." Leah gave me a final hug before heading out. I waved as she drove off, then returned to the house, poured myself another drink, and switched my phones back on. 2 days later, Linda called to inform me that Liza had agreed to my conditions for the lie detector test, and Tom had also consented. Tom even offered to cover the cost of his test, Linda added, as a way to show he's sorry for his part in the prank. "Here's the contact info for the test administrator." By then, my anger had cooled somewhat, but the sadness remained. If Liza truly loved me, how could she have gone along with such a humiliating prank? Maybe her love for me had faded, despite her insistence that she wanted to reconcile. I began to wonder whether I could endure a marriage devoid of real love, even if the tests proved she hadn't physically betrayed me. Liza had tried to call me several times, but I ended each call as soon as I heard her voice. Instead, Linda acted as a go-between, relaying Liza's apologies and pleas for reconciliation. Still, I stood firm. I would wait for the lie detector results before making any decisions. During those tense days, my son Jake frequently urged me to forgive his mother and let her come back home. No matter how much I explained the pain her actions had caused, he struggled to understand. To him, it was a joke gone wrong, nothing more. His persistence worried me. I knew our relationship could suffer if things ended in divorce. Leah, on the other hand, was more supportive and empathetic. She listened, understood my position, and didn't push me to make a quick decision. After Linda gave me the contact information for the lie detector test administrator, I reached out to a few trusted acquaintances in law enforcement. They vouched for Sam Turner, assuring me he was reliable and unbiased. Feeling reassured, I scheduled a meeting with him. The next day, I found out that Liza and Tom had already contacted Sam and scheduled their tests. They had listed me as an interested party with control over the questions. The following morning, I informed my boss I needed some personal time and went to meet Sam at his office. Sam listened carefully as I explained the situation. We agreed on a set of questions designed to determine whether any physical activity had occurred between Liza and Tom. He assured me that both of them would be asked the same questions, and he would provide a comprehensive report once the tests were complete. If both tests came back truthful, it would confirm nothing had happened. If either one failed, it would indicate deception and reconciliation would be off the table. Leaving his office, I felt a sense of relief. Soon, I would have clarity. Still, I knew even a clean report wouldn't erase the emotional damage. Over the next few days, I stayed busy with work, often staying late to avoid returning to an empty house. I ate at a local diner before heading home, where I would drink whiskey and attempt to sleep. The loneliness of the house weighed on me. Despite everything, I missed Liza's presence. On the morning of the test, uncertainty gnawed at me. If the results came back clean, I might have to consider forgiving Liza, on the condition she promised never to pull such a cruel prank again. Even then, it would take a long time to rebuild trust. Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was Sarah, sounding urgent. "Mark, it's Sarah. I found something important. Tom's at the testing center. Can you come over?" Alarmed by her tone, I rushed next door. Entering through the front door, I found Sarah in her home office, looking concerned. "Mark, you need to see this," she said, motioning for me to sit beside her. "What's going on?" I asked. "Tom's been acting strange since Tuesday. I caught him minimizing the screen a couple of times when I walked by. He's also been stepping out to take phone calls, and I'm pretty sure he talked to Liza yesterday. This is my first chance to check our computer without him around." With that, she opened the browser and showed me Tom's search history. My blood ran cold as I scanned the results. 4 different searches on how to beat a lie detector test. Sarah and I sat in silence for a moment, processing what we had just uncovered. Tom had clearly intended to manipulate the test results. After reading through several of the pages he had visited, we moved to the living room to discuss what to do next. Before we could make a decision, Tom's car pulled into the driveway. Sarah and I exchanged glances, bracing ourselves as he walked in. He greeted us with a cautious expression and sat down across from us on the couch. I noticed a slight limp in his walk, and the way he favored his left leg caught my attention. I decided to keep my discovery hidden for now. "Tom, I believe you passed the test with flying colors," I said casually. Honestly, I had a feeling nothing happened that day. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah's confused expression. She hadn't expected me to say that. Tom, however, looked relieved. "If you can promise that you and Liza will never pull another stunt like this again, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones and shake hands." I might even skip reading the report entirely. Relief washed over Tom's face, and he eagerly agreed. He extended his right hand toward me, and as I stepped forward, I firmly planted my foot on his right shoe. What happened next confirmed everything. Tom let out a scream and collapsed back onto the couch. He frantically pulled off his shoe, revealing a blood-soaked sock. Sarah and I exchanged a knowing glance. Everything made sense now. Tom had tried to cheat the test by using a technique we had read about. He had likely driven a nail through the sole of his shoe, pressing on it during the test to cause pain, which would mask any natural stress responses to the polygraph's questions. Did you really think you could beat the test by nailing your shoe to your foot? I asked coldly. You were trying to trick the polygraph by inducing pain to control your heart rate and sweating. Looks like it backfired. Tom didn't bother denying it. He looked defeated. Yeah, I cheated, he admitted quietly. And I showed Liza how to do it too. But not for the reason you're thinking. I wasn't interested in his excuses. Sarah, brace yourself, I said as we both sat back down. Tom tried to tend to his bleeding foot, while Sarah shot him a look of pure disgust. Clean up your mess before you ruin the carpet, I added sharply. Tom said nothing, clearly humiliated. I didn't need to see the report anymore. I already knew the truth. What's so complicated about asking if you had sex? I cut in, annoyed. Tom sighed. Sure, we could have passed that question easily, but we were worried you'd dig into something more subtle. Like what? I pressed. Well, has our behavior always aligned with what's expected in a marriage? Tom began awkwardly, only for Sarah to cut him off with an angry glare. It was obvious she wasn't buying it. Why else would you go to the trouble of sticking a damn nail in your shoe before the test? I asked, pushing further. And I'm guessing you forgot to bring spare shoes or pliers, judging by the fact you showed up with the nail still in your foot. Planning ahead has never been your strength, has it? Tom shifted uncomfortably. Please, honey, I didn't want to lose you, and Liza definitely didn't want to lose Mark. Sarah's expression hardened. Fine. Then tell me, dear husband, what exactly did you do that doesn't meet marital standards? Tom lowered his gaze and answered quietly. It was the day we pretended to fool around upstairs. We were jumping on the bed, fully clothed, just making it squeak. I can't remember who started it, but somehow, we ended up touching each other through our clothes. It was stupid, I know. I studied him carefully. He didn't seem to be lying, but if he was exceptionally good at it. I glanced at Sarah. Satisfied? Not even close, she snapped. These two have gotten so good at lying and scheming, I don't believe a word of it. Tom, tend to your leg, clean up the mess, and then leave. I need time to think. Tom's face betrayed genuine fear. Before he could move, he blurted out, I have a video, Sarah. What? Sarah and I said in unison, startled. I installed a camera in our bedroom before we handcuffed Mark in the basement. It recorded everything. I stared at him in disbelief. Then why the hell didn't you mention this earlier? Tom didn't need to answer. If the footage showed anything inappropriate, even fully clothed, it wasn't something they'd want anyone else to see. Personally, I've always believed that infidelity isn't just about sex. Any form of physical closeness, even a simple kiss, crosses a line. Tom limped out of the room to retrieve the video, and while he was gone, I couldn't resist sending Liza a message. Remove the nail from your shoe and come over to Sarah's house. Tom's about to show us a video. It usually took just a minute to walk from Linda's house to ours, but this time it took over 35 minutes before Liza knocked on the door. Sarah let her in, and I noticed her makeup was smudged and her eyes red from crying. Linda, who had accompanied her, explained. She panicked as soon as she read your message. She knew she was caught. Liza looked far more distressed than Tom had. As she sat beside me on the couch, she kept stealing glances at my face, trying to gauge my mood. Linda seemed unsure of what was coming, though Sarah and I had spent those 35 minutes discussing what we'd do if the video confirmed Tom's story. Sarah had already decided she'd forgive Tom after making him sweat for a while. I, on the other hand, was conflicted. Emotionally, I felt betrayed, something I'd always considered unforgivable. But logically, I knew Liza had been a good wife for 24 years, and both of our children had made it clear they didn't want to see our marriage end. Minutes after Liza and Linda arrived, Tom returned with his laptop. A USB flash drive protruded from one port, and a cable connected the laptop to the TV. I found it strange that he didn't just plug the flash drive directly into the TV, but then I recalled Sarah's earlier comment about his lack of tech skills. Tom powered up the laptop, and once the image synced with the TV screen, He muttered another apology and hit play. Liza immediately averted her eyes, avoiding the TV and everyone in the room. She knew how seriously I viewed fidelity, and this situation was clearly mortifying for her. Meanwhile, Linda watched the screen intently, unaware of what was about to unfold. Tom, looking a little more at ease, sat beside Sarah and attempted to hold her hand. She pulled her hand away without a word. The video began playing, lasting about 10 minutes, and it closely matched Tom's earlier description. There was no overt eroticism, just two fully clothed people bouncing on a bed, laughing and occasionally touching each other inappropriately through their clothes. As the video played, I tried to focus on the facts. Nothing in the footage showed actual sexual activity, but it was impossible to ignore the intimacy and inappropriate nature of what they were doing. It crossed a boundary, perhaps not physically, but emotionally. By the time the video ended, the room was steeped in an awkward silence. Tom looked relieved, as if the footage had exonerated him. Liza, however, couldn't bring herself to meet my gaze, likely knowing that while the video might clear her of one charge, it didn't erase the damage done to our marriage. Liza climbed on top of Tom, repeating word for word what I had heard while handcuffed in the basement. The video showed Tom initiating the inappropriate game, and Liza eagerly following along. Watching it was agonizing for two reasons. First, no man with any self-respect wants to see his wife behaving this way with another man. Second, hearing the same words I had heard that day reopened wounds that hadn't yet begun to heal. The pain in my wrists seemed to return, a vivid reminder of my helplessness back then. Halfway through the video, I shut my eyes tightly, unable to bear the sight or sound any longer. I tried to block it out, but the echoes of laughter and murmurs still reached me, each one like a dagger twisting deeper. I didn't open my eyes until the silence following their supposed climaxes filled the room, leaving a stifling tension. The screen went black, and the discomfort in the room was palpable. Linda cast a disgusted look at Liza, while Tom glanced at Sarah with hope in his eyes. Liza sat rigid, staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sarah shattered the silence by abruptly standing. "You deceitful traitor!" she spat, her voice cold and cutting. It was the harshest thing I'd ever heard her say. Tom flinched visibly at her outburst, clearly taken aback. Before anyone could react, Sarah slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed sharply, and Tom staggered slightly, stunned by the blow. I had never seen Sarah this furious before, and it was clear she wasn't done. "Don't you dare touch me, you lying scoundrel," she hissed, raising her hand for another slap. Tom dodged the second strike, wincing as he shifted awkwardly, clearly favoring his injured leg. "This video is fake," Sarah snapped. "Why? What were you trying to accomplish?" Tom, still flustered, stammered, We invited Mark and Liza over that night to relax on the patio, but it rained, so we stayed inside." Sarah's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Really, Tom? Look at the sunlight streaming through the window in that video. That window doesn't get direct sunlight until noon. And that day, it rained all afternoon. You staged the entire thing." Tom's face drained of color as the realization of his failure dawned on him. That was all the confirmation I needed. They had tampered with the video to deceive us, and any fleeting thought of forgiveness vanished. I hated being manipulated, and more than that, I hated that Liza had played a part in this elaborate lie. Liza let out a groan and bolted out the door, unable to face the fallout. Linda remained seated, stunned by her sister's behavior. I suspected she had started to realize how much Liza had lied to her. Meanwhile, Sarah advanced toward Tom, her fury unrelenting. Tom tried to maneuver around me, using me as a shield. Bad move. I took a step forward and stomped on his injured leg with all my strength. Tom let out a scream, doubling over in pain. As his head lowered, my knee met his face. Blood spurted from his nose, and he staggered backward, clutching his face in agony. Without waiting for more punishment, Tom turned and fled the house, limping as he chased after Liza. Blood dripped from his nose onto the floor as he made his escape. Inside, the three of us remained frozen, locked in a grim tableau. Sarah trembled, tears streaming down her face. I understood exactly how she felt. Tom, the man she had loved and trusted for nearly 25 years, had shattered everything. Now, she was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had just been torn apart. Linda sat quietly, perhaps horrified by how far things had escalated, or maybe ashamed of her sister's deceit. I couldn't tell, and honestly, I didn't care. My priority was Sarah. I approached her and pulled her into a hug. She clung to me tightly, trembling uncontrollably as she sobbed into my shoulder. I've always preferred to grieve in private, but in that moment, I remained calm, holding her as she mourned the end of her marriage. Despite the chaos, my mind raced with questions. I already regretted letting Tom leave with only a broken nose. I glanced at Linda, wondering if she had stayed to offer an apology, or if she was simply too stunned to leave. I didn't ask. I wasn't about to break my connection with Sarah. One thing became clear as I held Sarah. While Tom had a certain cleverness, Sarah had been sharper. If she hadn't noticed the sunlight clue in the video, we might still be in the dark, believing their lies. In hindsight, their attempt to manipulate us was almost impressive, but what angered me most was their sheer audacity in thinking they could get away with it. Despite the staged visuals, one detail stuck with me: the audio. The words, laughter, and sounds of intimacy matched perfectly with what I had heard while chained in the basement. That couldn't be easily faked. It led me to one inevitable conclusion. They had either overlaid the original audio onto new footage or reenacted the scene with precision. Either way, it didn't matter. They had conspired, lied, and tried to humiliate us. Whatever chance Liza had at earning my forgiveness was quickly slipping away. Both scenarios were built on recordings from the original incident, and suddenly Tom's decision to play the video through his laptop made sense. After giving Sarah one last comforting hug, I gently lowered her onto the couch and made my way to my own laptop. I breathed a small sigh of relief upon seeing that it hadn't gone into sleep mode, avoiding the hassle of entering my password. I chuckled at myself, realizing how silly that concern was. Even if it had locked, I could have used another device to view the flash drive. Clearly, my mind was still foggy from everything that had happened. With practiced fingers, I navigated the keys and mouse, closing the current software and opening the folder containing the video files. Among them was the clip we had just seen, titled Video 8. 7 other clips were labeled Video 2 through Video 7. However, what caught my attention were 2 additional files, Me and Liza Original and Basement. I clicked on the file labeled Basement and fast-forwarded through it. About 3/4 of the way in, I found footage of myself, handcuffed to that cursed bar, captured by what was clearly a hidden camera. The sight of it stirred a rush of unpleasant memories. Unable to continue watching, I closed the file, feeling a wave of nausea rise. Next, I selected Me and Liza Original, a file significantly larger than the others. Sarah, noticing my hesitation, gave me an encouraging nod, so I pressed play. The footage began with a view of Tom and Sarah's bedroom, but from a different angle than Video 8. Curious, I dashed down the hallway to compare the 2 perspectives. After about 30 seconds of quick detective work, I determined that the original footage had been recorded from a camera hidden on a bookshelf, while the subsequent versions were likely shot using a tripod-mounted camera positioned at the foot of the bed. Satisfied with my deduction, I returned to the living room, where the timer on the screen indicated just over an hour of footage remained. Clearly, Tom wasn't skilled at video editing. I fast-forwarded through the clip, pausing briefly at the 20-minute mark, then skipping forward in 30-second intervals until the action began. Settling back onto the couch beside Sarah, I held her hand for mutual support. The differences between the original version and the subsequent doctored videos were stark. The only similarity was how it started, Liza pushing Tom onto his back. About 25 seconds later, both Sarah and Linda gasped audibly. On the screen, Liza turned her head, glancing down and slightly to the left of the camera, as if looking at something below. That's when I noticed it, a floor vent leading to a channel perfectly positioned to carry the sounds of their so-called prank down to the basement, where I had been trapped. But it wasn't just the vent that caught my attention. It was the expression on Liza's face. There was a cruel gleam in her eyes, one that made my stomach turn. She had known exactly what she was doing. She knew I was down there, listening, and she had enjoyed every second of it. My supposedly loving wife had taken pleasure in tormenting me mentally, and the realization was almost too much to bear. I fought the urge to vomit. On the screen, Tom noticed where Liza was looking and gave her a smirk, as if relishing in their shared cruelty. A few more seconds passed before he turned her onto her back, kneeling beside her and fumbling with his belt. Liza lifted her skirt and pulled off her underwear, tossing it aside casually. The rest of the video played out exactly how I had feared during that horrible night in the basement. Seeing it unfold, knowing it was real and not just in my imagination, felt like a punch to the gut. Liza's apparent enjoyment had likely emboldened Tom, triggering the chain of events that followed. If I had to guess, this was probably their first physical encounter, judging by how clumsy it appeared. Still, it didn't change the fact that it had happened. After the video ended, Linda broke the silence. Is there any chance of a future for you two? She asked quietly, though her tone suggested she wasn't hopeful. I paused, sorting through my emotions for what felt like a long minute. No, Linda, not in this lifetime. I took a deep breath before continuing. Ironically, if Liza had come to me afterward and explained that it started as a prank but spiraled out of control, maybe, just maybe, I could have considered forgiveness. But instead, they chose to lie. They tampered with evidence, tried to rewrite history, and even attempted to fool a lie detector test. That level of deceit goes beyond anything I ever thought she was capable of. I shook my head, the weight of it all pressing down on me. It makes me wonder how well I ever really knew her. What else has she lied to me about? And let's not forget, this wasn't a one-time thing. After that night, she went back to Tom and engaged in at least one more physical interaction during their so-called workout sessions. How many times did it happen? Once? Twice? More? I don't know. But that expression on her face. I trailed off, glancing at Linda. I'm sure you saw it too. Linda nodded solemnly, her eyes filled with sadness. I understand, Mark. I can't say I blame you. Just, please, if I can ask one thing, don't publicly shame her. It would only hurt your children. I won't, I replied after a moment. I have no intention of making this any worse for them. But as far as Liza and I are concerned, it's over. Linda lowered her head, clearly disheartened but accepting my decision. The room fell into silence once more, and for a moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe, trying to process everything that had unfolded. If you give me a copy of the video, I'll calmly explain everything to Mom, Dad, Liza, and even your children if necessary, Linda offered. Her voice carried a quiet determination, despite the sadness in her eyes. I nodded and thanked her sincerely. As she left, I noticed her resolve, though the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. Sarah, sitting nearby, had already opened the phone book to the legal section. Over the following weeks, Sarah and I became a source of comfort for each other. Both of us needed someone who truly understood the pain of betrayal. However, we both knew that the memories tied to our respective exes were too painful to build something lasting, so we eventually parted ways amicably. One late night, after another visit to console Sarah, I encountered Tom in her front yard, seething with jealousy. He was furious that I had been visiting Sarah so frequently, 5 times a week, to be exact. What a deluded fool, I thought. How did he hope to win her back while I was helping her through the aftermath of his betrayal? Tom's rage only fueled my own. Glancing around to ensure there were no witnesses, I took great satisfaction in breaking his nose again. This time, I didn't feel even a hint of guilt. The memory of his sadistic smirk, right before he destroyed my marriage, was all the provocation I needed. Tom didn't fare well during the divorce proceedings. Sarah, with my full support, crucified him when he tried to demand a share of the assets. She threatened to press charges for unlawful restraint, using the basement footage as evidence. Realizing he was cornered, Tom cut his losses and skipped town. It was for the best. I might have been bluffing about pressing charges. I could have endured the public embarrassment, but I didn't want to humiliate my children or Liza's extended family. About a week after the incident with the video, Liza reached out to me. Her message implied that she was unaware I had seen the original footage. She likely assumed Tom wouldn't have been foolish enough to keep all the incriminating evidence in one place. Her tone hinted at hope. She seemed to believe my silence about the video meant there was still a chance for us. The message also reminded me that I hadn't yet sent the clips to Linda. Curious, I called Linda to confirm whether she still wanted the video. She did. During our conversation, she mentioned that Liza had moved back in with her parents. I decided it was time to burn the videos onto a DVD. As I did so, I realized I hadn't actually watched videos 2 through 7, so I did. What I saw extinguished any remaining softness or forgiveness I had left in my heart, turning it to stone. Each clip depicted Liza and Tom engaging in increasingly intimate behavior during their so-called workouts. It became clear that the incident I witnessed wasn't an isolated mistake. It was part of a pattern. Liza's expression in these videos was the same one she wore in the original, a mix of cruel enjoyment and reckless indulgence. In my anger, I nearly reconsidered my earlier restraint. For a brief moment, I thought about sending the entire set of clips to everyone in Liza's contact list. But I calmed down, thinking of how it would affect my children. I knew they were already struggling with the fallout of our broken family. I tried to track down Tom to deliver one final message, but he had already vanished. No, Liza wouldn't be forgiven, and unfortunately, Tom wouldn't be getting a third broken nose. Instead, I sent all the clips to Linda with a firm warning. If I heard any complaints about how I was treating Liza, I would release the entire video to the public. Linda must have handled the situation well, because soon after, one by one, Liza's parents, Jake and Leah, called me. They expressed understanding, acknowledging why my marriage was beyond repair. Later, I learned that Linda had recounted the entire ordeal to them and even offered to show the clips as proof. Only Liza's mother took her up on the offer. Halfway through the original video, she became so ill that she couldn't finish watching. Following these events, Liza didn't contest the divorce. Through Linda, I found out that she had moved out of her parents' house and rented a small apartment. Despite everything, I wasn't aiming to cheat her out of a fair settlement. 24 years of marriage had to count for something, and I didn't want any lingering resentment from my children down the line. In time, if they chose to forgive their mother, I wanted them to know I had handled things fairly. Eventually, Liza sent me a heartfelt letter. In it, she apologized sincerely for her actions and the attempted cover-up. Her words conveyed a profound loneliness, a desperation not for reconciliation with me, but for forgiveness, for closure. She begged me to forgive her, not just for her sake, but for the sake of her parents, our children, and our mutual friends. Her words almost moved me to tears. Almost. But it was too late. My heart had hardened. The betrayal, the lies, the pain she had caused. It was too much to overcome. I wasn't bitter, but I was resolute. Our chapter was closed, and there was no reopening it. I wasn't actively seeking a replacement for Liza, but that didn't mean I was without options. Single women seem to notice me more now. Ask any middle-aged woman about the availability of decent, moral, and good-looking men, and you'll hear the same thing: there aren't many around. I wasn't in a hurry to jump into anything serious. In fact, I had no intention of marrying again. But I looked forward to meeting new people and enjoying life on my terms. For the first time in a long while, I felt free, and I intended to make the most of it.